Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we brought a certain side quest to an end. We have Alfred here, who's given up his life, having, as far as he's concerned, achieved his dream of properly canonizing Martyr Ligarius so that he doesn't have to stay in a frozen vigil watching over an undying queen. But, as I was saying last time, there may be a little bit more along that storyline, but we're not really going to follow it anymore. We have other things to do. We have things that we should have been doing if we follow the logic of the main quest this entire time, that we've sort of been stymied in our progress, right? So just to recap, because it's been a while, we had found out that we're bound to the dream and will be so until we can find the source of the spreading scourge of beasts and stop it. And we have some reason to think that the source of the spreading scourge of beasts is tied to the state of the moon. And the moon being drawn close. What's drawing the moon close? A secret hidden ritual. And in order to stop that ritual, we need to reveal it. How do we reveal it? Well, the thing that seems to be hiding all rituals is the Byrgenwerth spider, this thing called the Byrgenwerth spider. So we did some research. We learned about Byrgenwerth, and it's this old college that lies through the Forbidden Woods. We needed a password in order to go there. We got the password. We went through the Forbidden Woods. We found Byrgenwerth, and then it was a little too stoutly guarded, not necessarily by the eldritch horrors that still lurk in its corridors, but by one particular hunter enemy who is very strong. So we still have that encounter to go back to. We need to defeat the sort of last defender of Byrgenwerth, and then see if we can't locate this spider. And that is probably going to take some doing, but I think we're up for it. I think we've suitably powered ourselves up from the Chalice Dungeon explorations and the rest of the world exploration that we've done, and it's time to take on that challenge once more. Before we do that, though, there's a bunch of descriptions we'll have to read. Actually, I think I'll do that in the location itself. So I'll see you back at Byrgenwerth. You see, what I realized is, after we emerge victorious, we're going to have some notes that we're going to want to read anyway. So, because we're going to be occupied with a bunch of reading in the form of those notes regardless, I figure we can read the key description and then take things, what little is left with Byrgenwerth, from there. All right, let's see if we've gotten any stronger. Okay. The Rosmarinus is still a nightmare. Good dodge, me. Uh-oh. Okay, but I can sort of fight through it with this beast claw. That's good. And we're dealing decent damage to the enemy now. Uh-oh. Gotta watch my stamina. I want to just constantly... Uh-oh. I'm enough... Okay, dodge forward now. Okay. That's the one thing that that particular attack... If you're in the right position, which is sort of everything in this sort of setup, if you're in the right position... you can dodge forward through that big blast spell, and it usually works out pretty well for you because it projects away from the caster. So if you can go up real close to the caster, it's a huge help. So, all right, now we've defeated the last defender of Byrgenwerth here, the last serious obstacle in our path, and now it's time to collect a few more things. So here we have the student set. I mean, this would add to our reading, except we've already read it, right? But I do think it's important to point out, let's just scroll down forever until we find... Boy, we really are scrolling down forever. Okay, here we go. Until we find... Here we have the new one that we picked up. This is the new student uniform, which you can tell it's new because it's got this overcloak, or... I'm not entirely sure what the right term for this would be in terms of attire, because... Here's the regular uniform, and then here's the uniform with the robe that goes over it. So literally, it's talking about manto, which is normally translated as like cape, But looking at this visual, this doesn't look like a cape to me. I mean, maybe you could call it that, but it's got like sleeves that go over the arms, sort of more like a greatcoat, maybe. I don't really know. I'm not an expert in articles of clothing when it comes to this sort of thing. If you do know a lot more about this style of clothing, maybe you can tell me what the exact correct term for this is. But I mean, a robe or a greatcloak seems appropriate to me, like I was saying before. We'll go with it. Anyway, this, as you can see, the only difference between these two student garbs is the second line there. And the only distinction is this is the one with the outer garment, and this is the one with the outer garment removed. And, oops. Oh, no. All right, if I go up from the bottom, it'll probably be faster. I've got so much stuff. Wasn't it after the madman? It was. Okay, it was definitely a lot faster. Okay, anyway, the student trousers here, completely identical. Which, this, as boring as it is, that these sets of attire are like exactly the same in terms of description, it is interesting in terms of world building that we've got one set of student attire in Byrgenwerth, and it's identical in its description and its look, except for the, one. Why can't I control item categories anymore? Turned into a total Butterfingers. Anyway, we do have like the one visual difference, but it's really just the presence of an external coat, right? It's pretty minor. And the descriptions are almost entirely the same. It's another layer of continuity between the Nightmare Lecture Building and what we're seeing here in Byrgenwerth. Exact same student uniform. That makes sense. It's the exact same place. The Nightmare Lecture Hall, we know, is sort of a part of Byrgenwerth here that is now in the Nightmare? Certainly in a Nightmare. I don't know if I can call it, like, use a collective and talk about the Nightmare. I've talked about that before in the series in terms of lore. Also in terms of lore, what do I want to do first here? Let's start with these notes. Yeah, I think this one is the less puzzling note of the two that are here in Byrgenwerth. So this is a note, and importantly, it's sort of this piece of paper right here on this couch that was sort of by where, like, if you wait for the NPC to cycle, it's where she starts and it's where she ends, because she sort of ends up facing towards the treasure chest, and if you're more clever than I am, or more patient, you can wait for her to finish her route and then look away from you and get a free backstab. But I think it's important to note the placement of this particular scrap of paper on this couch and its proximity to the hunter that we defeated, because it seems like, this is something that's never really spelled out, but it seems like this is some sort of communication that's related to that hunter. So if that's the case, then it's sort of important. And if we look at the hunter, right, we don't have this information yet. This is another one of these things where Bloodborne is giving you information, and you don't necessarily know that the game is giving you information yet on your first playthrough. But if you play a little bit further on and you have a good memory, or if you've played through the game multiple times, you'll know that that person that we just fought, not only were they dressed in the choir set, but they were using techniques, that like arcane burst that I was talking about. You sort of, if you can, want to dodge into it towards where the caster is, because the projectiles sort of always fire out. So that is a choir technique in particular. So it seems like from the garb and the fighting techniques, that particular NPC hunter is related to the choir, which is potentially important if we tie her location to the proximity of this note, which I still haven't read yet. I'm going to get to it. Here we go. Okay. The spider hides all rituals. This is sort of exactly the same as the information that we got way back when in the sort of cathedral ward entrance thing up from the Tomb of Erden, right? Where the spider hides all manner of rituals and keeps our lost master from us. A terrible shame, makes my head shudder uncontrollably. That's the one we saw before. This opening line here, exactly the same. The spider hides all rituals, all manner of rituals. Either one, I don't think there's a huge difference between those two things, right? Adoyudu is like every single one, right? So the spider's hiding all rituals. And the next line is where things get interesting. They are not to be exposed, because arawa ni suru, so arawa is to like expose or to reveal, to make clear, and then ni suru is sort of what makes it into a verb, right? Arawa is just exposure. Arawa ni suru is to lay something bare, right? To expose. And then koto is turning that arawa ni suru into it's a grammatical expression that's going to tie in with nakare, which the nakare part is like, don't do it, right? So they're not to be exposed. So we are actually getting some confirmation about what I was saying before. It seems like if we can take the proximity of the hunter to be related to, like, this note, the choir is trying to stop people from interfering with this ritual, from exposing the ritual. It seems like that NPC hunter really was here to make sure that nobody disturbs the ritual that's going on. And the choir, maybe, is invested in not having that revealed. Wait, gameplay Matt. You can't just say this is what the choir wants. There's another possibility to consider here, where the choir as an organization hopes to stop the Mensis ritual, and this note merely indicates the private thoughts of the hunter they sent to Byrgenwerth. This second possibility could actually make more sense than the first, because as we'll see, the choir and the School of Mensis are two opposed high-level factions in the Healing Church. Although, then again, it could be that the protection of the Byrgenwerth spider is one of the few points of common ground between the groups, since by hiding all rituals, it might be hiding whatever the choir is up to as well. Also, to give Gameplay Matt his due, he did have these possibilities in mind, he just didn't do a very good job of articulating them. So let's return to him now and see where he takes the point. Whether or not it's specifically the choir or specifically this particular NPC, whoever wrote this note is saying that we know that the spider is hiding these things, and we don't want those things to come to light. And the final line here. Okay, so this is a little bit of a thing that you can sort of get a little bit more from the Japanese than you can from the English. Because keimo teki shinjitsu, the keimo part is the same term that is used for insight. It's literally enlightenment. And most of the time, I think insight is just a better translation than enlightenment. It makes more sense to say I have 44 insight than I have 44 enlightenment. That's weird, right? It's not like enlightenment doesn't have that sort of quantity idea to it. At least it doesn't seem to flow as naturally as the word insight. Also, there's a little bit of pun, right? Of a pun. We've already seen, right? We need more eyes. Byrgenwerth, it's about eyes on the inside, and nobody really knows what that means, but that seems to be what they're going for. So insight, inner sight, eyes on the inside, right? There's a pun going on there. This has been something that people have talked about like right from the moment the game came out. So there are a lot of reasons why I think insight is a great translation. This is one of the things, unfortunately, that you sort of lose with that. They could have called this the insightful truth, but I don't know, because I feel like insightful truth, while it does tie in with the mechanic of insight, I don't know if it ties in as well with the truth of the world that's going on with, the other meaning I think that's probably being played on here for enlightenment, right? The enlightened truth, I think the official translation has this as true enlightenment, and it's okay, right? But there is, I do think, a little bit more that you can get from the Japanese. And that's just how it goes in translation sometimes. It's a lossy process, I think I've said before. So anyway, that's just the subject. Let's finish the rest of the sentence here. It is a thing that there is no necessity for anyone to understand. So to consider the sentence as a whole, the insightful truth is a thing which it is not necessary for anyone to understand. That need not be understood by anyone. Right? It's the sort of thing that need not be understood by anyone. And I think the official translation is true enlightenment need not be shared. And so I was talking before about how you sort of lose the tie to insight in English. I do like that they're talking about how it need not be shared, because I do think that this note seems to be implying that people are trying to hide the rituals, right? We know that the Byrgenwerth spider, the spider that's here in Byrgenwerth, that we're getting the sort of repeat reference to, minus the actual word Byrgenwerth, but we're in the location, right? So that stands for something. They know that the Byrgenwerth spider is, in fact, hiding rituals. There's a ritual going on right now. That ritual is tied into what's happening with the beasts and everything that's going on in the world. And if that were to be exposed, right? If somehow the spider were to be stopped, then everything would be laid bare, and by implication, everyone would understand the insightful truth. And this note is saying they don't need to understand the insightful truth. Not everybody needs to have that. So I think the idea that true enlightenment need not be shared, right? There is a group, the group that's performing the ritual, that's totally fine with the ritual being hidden. So it makes sense that from their perspective, none of these other dummies need to know what's going on right now. We don't need the true nature of the universe to be laid bare for everyone to behold. We don't need them to see that we're in this ritual. We don't need them to understand all the secrets of the world. We can just let them go about their lives in ignorance while we benefit from this ritual, from what we're trying to achieve, delving into the deepest nature of reality. So that idea of them knowing about it and wanting it to keep it from everyone, I think the idea of true enlightenment need not be shared is a really good way of getting at that sense. Especially because, this is a note, it's the character limits have to be relatively tight on English. It just have to be. So I feel like they did about as good of a job they could have, the official translators, with this note. Very impressive to me. I will say the one other thing that I forgot to mention before about the insightful truth as opposed to the, true enlightenment, the one additional thing that's nice about tying it to insight is that you can, if you get your own insight high enough, I didn't do it in this playthrough, I maybe I could do it like right now if I really wanted to, but I don't think I do. I think it's cooler to let the reveal happen the way that you sort of experience it most likely the first time you play the game, which is you defeat Rom and then all of a sudden everything is revealed. Rom is the Byrgenwerth spider. We'll find that out shortly, so I don't mind giving it away. But if you do get your insight, I think it's up to 60 or something like that, you can see maybe not all the rituals, but a number of the things that the Byrgenwerth spider is hiding. And so the truth can be revealed with enough insight. And so calling it the insightful truth might have had that benefit. But then true enlightenment, right? It's the nature of the truth of the world. So true enlightenment also does sort of work. Anyway, I think I've covered this note pretty thoroughly. And like I said, that's the more straightforward and understandable note. Before we tackle the less straightforward and more difficult to understand note, we do have one more key to take a look at because we're about to use it. We need to in order to access the final portion of Byrgenwerth here. So this is the moon viewing platform key. And the idea of moon viewing, I talked about this in Translation Born, is something that is sort of, it's a known concept in Japanese culture. Particularly around like September or fall, that sort of timeline, people talk about the skimi season. And it's practically a lot of the time, it gets used a little bit as an excuse to go out and drink and look at the moon, sort of like how the flower viewing season is a little bit of an excuse to go out and get drunk and look at the flowers. But, setting that aside, there is like a certain amount of cultural cachet that the idea of a moon viewing has in Japanese. But also at the same time, right, the moon is of deep importance to Bloodborne. But anyway, the translators called this the lunarium key, right? And it plays off the idea of a solarium, which is based on the sun, Luna for the moon, lunarium. And it sort of makes sense because it's this specific platform designed to view the moon at Byrgenwerth. And what would you call that? Lunarium makes sense. It's sort of a made-up word, but it's a word that I think is very appropriate. Very clever. I think it's really cool when you get thrown challenges like this as a translator, and then you have to try and find a natural way to render that same concept into English. And when you can make it sound like, of course, you make it sound like a word that someone's just never heard before, like lunarium, it feels like it should be an English word. So I think that's great. I've done a little bit of research on this. I think technically it actually is. It's like a model of the universe or something like that. But it's been a while since I did that research. That might be inaccurate. It's certainly when you actually go out, it's perfectly clear when you're playing the game, you go out onto the lunarium, what the lunarium is. Anyway, I've spent long enough, I think, on that title. Let's get on to the actual description. It's relatively short here. And again, the first line is pretty straightforward, right? Key to the lunarium, or the moon viewing platform, on the second floor of Byrgenwerth, facing the lake. Okay, and then the second section here, because that first part's pretty straightforward. In his later years, schoolhead Willem loved this place and swayed back and forth. Back and forth isn't there, but it goes with the verb. Swayed back and forth in his rocking chair. Okay, final line. And he is said to have hidden a secret in the lake. Okay, and that's a little bit of a clue. And we've also gotten a little bit of a clue before, a long time ago, in the form of the final shared section of the lake runes and also the deep sea runes, where we talk about how large bodies of water serve as a severance guarding sleep, and therefore are augurs of the eldritch truth, and all ye who seek strive to go beyond them, right? So if you encounter a large body of water, it's likely a sign that some sort of greater arcane wisdom is being blocked by that watery barrier, and you should therefore try and penetrate that barrier. So we're going to put those clues to use in a moment here. But again, that key was a little bit of a breather, right? Fairly straightforward in terms of translation, very clever with the invention of the term lunarium, but otherwise pretty straightforward. A little bit of a cryptic hint. There's a secret in the lake, and the nature of the arcane disguised by waters. We have to seek to move beyond those barriers, right? So while we're pondering that, let's also try and ponder this. And this note starts out by giving us some helpful information, and then gets very vague. And gets very difficult to parse. And we'll take this one as it goes. I think I basically I made a point, I think, in Translation Born about this note, that it's sort of like there are so many options, particularly for the final set of lines. The second, actual line here. There's two sort of parts to it, but the entire two parts on that second line there, they're so vague. You could interpret them in so many different ways that you sort of have to commit to something, right? There's some interpretive leap that you inevitably have to take. And I think I used the moment in Translation Board to talk about how there's no such thing as a safe translation, right? Sometimes sometimes you can sort of hedge your bets. You can be a little bit more generic if you don't know the context. And you often don't know the full context when you're translating a video game, right? I've talked before, it's been my experience more often than not in my work. If I'm doing something for a video game, I'm not able to access the video game at all. So I have to guess. Sometimes you just have to guess. That's true, but this being a less formal playthrough, I can maybe take a stab at what this might be getting at. We're gonna try and find out. I've been putting this off for too long. Let's just go for it. Okay, so when the red moon approaches, human boundaries become vague. Yeah, and that's the easier part of the message. But even then, the boundaries of humans become vague. The borders of humans. It's sort of a difficult, I'll put a dictionary definition up of the relevant term here that I'm talking about is borders. But this is sort of where we get the idea that on nights of the hunt, or specifically when the red moon is close, presumably this closeness of the red moon is tied to the proximity of great ones. And something about that event, the red moon being close, causes human boundaries to become vague. And I think the official translation is something like the line between man and beast is blurred. I think that's true. I think if we're going to be interpreting what it means for these human boundaries to become vague, then we can talk about the line between man and beast. We could also potentially talk about the line between man and kin, right? Because the Japanese is a little bit more generic. We've already identified the proximity of the moon, and in particular the red moon, with bestial transformations. So already from the context we have in the game, it makes perfect sense to talk about the proximity of the red moon causing the line between man and beast to be blurred. But again, the Japanese is just talking about blurred boundaries in general, so do they blur up as well as down? I think that's reasonable. So people could view these Nights of the Hunt as a particularly useful time if you're trying to ascend. So that's one possibility there. And then we've also got the idea, is it just human boundaries? Is it the boundaries between everything, between all sorts of being, the boundaries between worlds, right? This is where we can go in, and again, a little iffy because it's only talking about human boundaries. It's not necessarily talking about world boundaries, but might this be indicative of the greater influence of the nightmare or dream realms upon reality than on regular nights? Also, might this have something to do with our being, potentially, my crazy lore theory, a dead spirit walking around in this world, tied to the dream? Is that something that is uniquely possible on Nights of the Hunt when the red moon is close? Are all hunts happening when the red moon is close? I don't know. It doesn't, certainly that's what's happening this time. Is that what happens every time? It doesn't seem like it. Right? Gehrman says the moon is close, it will be a long hunt tonight. Makes it sound like there are some hunts that are shorter and less severe where the moon is not so close. So maybe that's not always the case with the sort of world, the nature of the world. In any case, what we can say for sure is that some level of boundaries involving humans, like the very minimum thing that we can say, is that human boundaries become unclear. All right, now let's get to the even stranger portion down here. The great higher rank one or the great higher rank ones appear or appears, right? Could be one, could be many, right? Higher rank one, of course, my literal version of great ones. So I didn't want to say the great ones. It's a little bit repetitive. So I went with the more literal higher rank ones, even though I don't think on its own it sounds very good. So again, I do think you can tie the idea of the appearance of the Great One and the approach of the red moon, right? I think the appearance of the Great Ones with the approach of the red moon has to do with there being a Great One associated with the moon. It's pure speculation, but it stands to reason to me. And again, are there multiple Great Ones or is it just one Great One? Unclear. The Japanese, there's no way to specify. And then the final section here, which is where the greatest amount of ambiguity creeps in. Okay, so we could read this last line as, and embraces us children, right? Because, so here's the thing. Dakan is the final term here. The verb is daku. Could be idaku, and therefore idakan. I don't like the sound of that personally as much, but it could be that. And unlike mieru versus mamieru, this is a situation where dakan versus idakan doesn't make a huge difference. There's a lot of overlap between those two different readings of the kanji. What's unclear is the form that it's been conjugated into. So let's just go with daku as the base verb because that's the one that I prefer to say. If we go with daku, then dakan could be will not embrace children. All right, it could be a form of the negative. I think that's less likely. I think this is an archaic version of the mu form that means surely this is going to happen. It's a little bit of an indication of something that's going to happen in the future, right? You believe that something is going to happen in the future. So, and therefore embrace us children. That's one possible understanding of this line. I'm not sure that's the one to go with, but it is a one to go with, another one to go with, and will surely embrace our child. Another one to go with, and surely I will embrace a child. Right? Why is it we versus I? Well, here's the thing, right? Warera can be plural. In most modern usage, it's plural. But if we're going for the archaic sense of daku for dakan, then maybe we should go with the archaic sense of warera for I. And because that sense is mostly archaic and poetical, I can't help but wonder if maybe we can associate its usage with a figure who's in a similar position to Queen Annalise. And remember, again, right, I was talking before about how we discovered the last note on a couch, on a sofa. And I was drawing some information out of its placement there by the hunter who's preventing us from seeing the Byrgenwerth spider. But if we look at this one, it's on a bookcase. Might this archaic language be an indication that the information we're receiving that's on this bookcase here is coming from the perspective of someone who lived in ancient times? Remember, Byrgenwerth is a school that's all about archaeology. It's about digging into the past. They've gone into the old labyrinth. What sorts of old texts do they have access to? Is this one of these old texts? Is this using an archaic version of wareda to mean I, the queen, will hold a child in my arms when the Great One appears with the approach of the red moon and the boundaries of humans become blurred? That's sort of the one that I'm most interested in, because it gets back to this idea of blood queens that I was talking about with Annalise. I think it's possible that this could be from the perspective of Queen Yarnum. Now, that could be totally off. This is hugely interpretive on my part. And again, right, this could just be an embrace us children, right? There's another tie you could, if we go back to that first possibility that I gave you, right? What happens in the ending that I'm not going to get this time, but the ending that is sort of associated with, like, it's the worst possible outcome, really. It's where this Great One descends upon the moon, and what does it do? It gives you a hug. And you become, I guess, enamored with it, and you sort of take over Gehrman's advisory position. And that's an embrace of us as if we were a child, right? We sort of take, because Great Ones like lose a child and then seek to replace it with some other child. Maybe Gehrman right now, and potentially us, on this, night when the red moon is close, are going to end up taking the place of a Great One's child when we're embraced by that Great One. That is one totally valid way to read that line there. I think that's an interesting way, but it could also mean that, okay, surely our child is going to be embraced. And what's the dearest wish of the Vile Bloods? It's to hold a child of blood within those arms. So that goes back to the idea of the Immaculate Conception, right? And possibly this sort of line of thinking maybe informed the official translation here, because I think, if I remember correctly, again, I don't have this in front of me, the official translation is something to the effect of, when the red moon hangs low, the line between man and beast is blurred, and the Great Ones descend, a womb will be blessed with child. And I'm not entirely sure about, literally where the idea of a womb being blessed with child comes from. Might be a remnant of an older translation. These notes were added super last minute, and I don't know how effective the back and forth was. I've talked about this before, in terms of the actual process of the translation. So what sort of notes did the translators get when they were looking at this phrase? I'm not sure, Gameplay Matt, but I do know you've forgotten a very important piece of evidence. So I've mentioned before that I suspect the Japanese text is generally a little more up to date than the English. And thanks to Last Protagonist, we have some additional linguistic evidence to indicate that this note in particular might be one of those instances. By comparing the Korean translation to the English one, which notably was not based on the English version, like some of the European language releases, we can see that both make reference to conceiving a child. However, while a literal reading of the current Japanese is vague, I'm not aware of a meaning of the term daku or idaku that fits this meaning. And while it's possible that one group of translators would make the interpretive leap to the idea of conception, it's unlikely that two unaffiliated translation teams would make the exact same leap. That means we could be looking at a situation where the English and Korean translations are both referencing an older Japanese text. Or it could mean there was communication from the developers to both teams that specified what was going on in this incredibly vague passage of Japanese. This is why Gameplay Matt was so curious about the level of communication at this point in development. As I've indicated before, I'm inclined to believe it wasn't very good, but since I didn't really explore the possibility in Translationborn, I thought it would be interesting to consider how this idea of conception may have been included. Thankfully, I can leave that part to gameplay Matt. The other possibility, if we want to really go with this idea of, like, giving birth, Daku can be used as a euphemism, sort of like in the English we talk about to sleep with someone, right? And surely, because again, I'm pretty sure that the Dakan is not the negative form, it's the archaic, like, surely form. And surely, sleep with us children. And that, like, the idea of sleeping with us children might be a way that the translators looked at the Japanese and said, well, let's be a little less cryptic about this, because the Japanese is very cryptic. I've given you, like 3 or 4 at least candidates that I think all make sense as possible interpretations of this line. Like, any one of those things you could argue for. And this is another one I think you could potentially argue for, right? Because if you think of the human race as a sort of child from the perspective of the Great Ones, they're going to sleep with the child race and therefore give birth. That's another way that we could take this. Which one of these ways is right? I have no idea. There's... I don't know how you would know. You would ask the director. I don't know. It's really, really hard to say. But I've been speculating on that for a really long time. Maybe one of those things I said was accurate. Maybe it's something completely different and something entirely otherwise is going on. But anyway, we've stood out here for, like, way too long. This is the thing. I knew if I started reading those notes, this episode was going to go forever. Now I just need to figure out how to get to the place where I'm going to use the key to unlock anything. I don't think I have to go up this ladder. It's the second floor of Byrgenwerth. Oh, you know what? It's just out this way. I didn't want to... I was looking over here, like the door was over here somewhere. It's right here. This is the door. This is the door that we can unlock with that key to the lunarium. And this is why I say it's pretty clear what it means, right? It's this big platform that you can view the moon from. And also, the lake. And also, hey, look who's here. Look who's here. We saw him in someone else's mind, in like a flashback. Let's talk to Master Willem. He's pointing at something. He's pointing towards the lake. It said he hid a secret in the lake. This is also something that I really appreciate about Bloodborne, is that they give you all these pieces, right? And you have to put together for yourself that you need to penetrate this watery barrier. You need to look down here and realize that you need to jump off. I mean, you could just follow a guide. But if you're just playing the game on your own, you need to figure out from the pointing of Master Willem, maybe from the idea of the lake runes, that these watery barriers are signs of the Eldritch Truth that's being blocked. And if you want to get access to the Byrgenwerth spider, you need to penetrate the watery barrier to uncover the arcane truth. And maybe from the Lunarium key that mentions that Master Willem has a secret hidden in the lake. So that's what we need to do. We need to, like, take the plunge. We need to jump down here, and that's how we'll progress. I was hoping we'd do it next time, but this fight can drag on, and this episode has gone very long. So I think what I'm going to do is finish up things up here, maybe go back to the dream, and then we'll do the actual boss fight next time. But in order to finish up here, Master Willem, thank you very much for your support, your help. You've been very useful to us, both in the past and in the present, even though you're not making a lot of verbal sense anymore. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to say, right? They could have had a scenario where you meet Master Willem and you're like, whoa, this is him, this is the guy, he's figured everything out, he was the source of everything, and you could just talk to him, and he would give you all the answers, right? But they don't want to just give you all the answers, they want you to figure it out, right? That's the other part of the point that I was making before that I think is great about Bloodborne. And I think that actually comes up in the interview, right? They thought about, like, we didn't want you to just be able to talk to Willem and have him give you all the answers. And I think that particularly for the game that they wanted to make with, you know, Bloodborne, all these arcane mysteries, one of the themes, remember, is exploring the unknown. They wanted you to put this together for yourself. and they didn't want Master Willem to just explain it all. And I think that's very cool. Very fitting. My actions appear inexplicable, but there's good reason for them. Oh, I got a blood dreg. I think that's one of the bugged ones. It's supposed to be mostly found in hunters, and in 1.00 it's mostly not found in hunters. So they had to fix that. Anyway, I did that. Don't normally like to kill characters, but we get a very important rune out of that maybe we'll talk about next time, because, again, I was thinking we would fight the boss in this episode, but it's been a decent length of time. So I think I'm going to stick to my plan towards the end of the episode rather than towards the beginning, and we're going to head back to the dream. Get out of here. I think this is the right way to go. Yeah, this is the quicker exit back to the lantern. Don't want to deal with that fly enemy. Here we go. Right. Thank you all very much for joining me. I'm going to take care of some sort of interstitial stuff in the lead up to the next episode, where we're going to get ready to actually fight the Byrgenwerth spider. The confrontation, it's going to take place at last. We've stripped away all the defenders. We've considered all the arcane mysteries. We haven't necessarily found any answers, but we're getting a little bit closer, and I think that's a decent amount of progress for an episode, so I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening. Thank you all very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish all of you good hunting.